Parade, live from New York City.
Live from New York Harbor, the greatest assemblage of tall ships in modern history. Welcome to the official op sale, July 4th, 1992. For the next 5 hours, along with friends, experts, and dignitaries, I'll be your guide, Bill Baker.
Op Sale 92, the Tall Ships Parade, is made possible by the Bank of New York, Chubb Group of Insurance Companies, Goya Foods, and McGraw-Hill.
Walter Cronkite joins us now. Walter, this year's celebration of Op Sale is celebrating the 500th anniversary of the arrival of Christopher Columbus in the United States and the 216th anniversary of the United States of America. Happy birthday, USA. Yeah. Walter, it's a joy to have you here, and it's a very cloudy, overcast day. New York looks like it's about half of New York right now. What brings a person like you, who could be anywhere in the world today if you wanted, to New York Harbor on this day?
I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world except in New York Harbor on this day. I have been fortunate enough to be here for the 76 and the 86 tall ships and the parade and celebration of our anniversaries. And, the 86, the dedication of the renewed Statue of Liberty on its birthday. It's a magic day in New York. I'm crazy about this harbor. This is one of the great natural harbors of the world. On its banks have been built one of the greatest cities of the world, and on this day we bring forth, in this particular occasion, the greatest assemblage of tall ships that's ever been seen. All of this combination, who would want to miss it?
Well, we're not going to miss it. We're going to be here for 5 hours to see it all. And Walter, I know you have had an interest and a love for the sea. Where did that germinate, and why is it so powerful in you?
I think it probably germinated when some of our ancestors just a few years ago climbed out of the primordial swamp to become land animals. I think we all have a certain love of the sea in us. If not love for it, at least a feeling of mystery about it, a fascination with it. I myself got involved in sailing several decades ago, and am an avid sailor today. I study the lore of the sea. I like these tall ships and what they stand for. They stand, of course, for the era when the sea carried all of our commerce, and our defense lines were out there on the oceans. It's something that, to me, just courses through my blood. Maybe it's because some other of my ancestors were among the original settlers of this little island here, from the Netherlands. And one of them was a shipbuilder, a shipwright.
We're going to hear a lot about the history of this wonderful city, and we are so grateful that you're here, and we want you to come back a little bit later on. So I know you'll be here, and thank you for being here, and I hope you come back soon. Meanwhile, you have to go over onto the stage for the big event.
You bet. See you later, Bill.
Okay. Well, there you saw it. It's a pretty foggy New York harbor. It's a pretty foggy one. But we've got a lot of people praying, including my mother-in-law and my mother, and they assure me by about 9:30 everything's going to clear up, and we're going to have quite a view. Let me try to give you an idea about what this coverage is that you're going to see. This is perhaps the biggest coverage, the biggest pool coverage ever assembled in New York Harbor. We have, I've got a big book of things in front of me that tell me everything that's going on. We have all 8 New York television stations who've stepped up to this, and they have cameras all over the place. And we'll be discussing where those cameras are and how it's all being put together. And I've got some interesting guests, and of course we've got a live stage show that we'll be going to shortly. But the big event will be the tall ships themselves, and we're hoping that that some of this fog burns out so you get to see them. But I am told by some of the best experts that tall ships look at their very best through fog. So nevertheless, we're going to be here. It's live. That's the way these things go. And none of us are television professionals. I'm a president of a public television station in New York, talking to all of our friends in New York City and all over the world on this live op sale telecast 92. And I've got with me the man that started this whole crazy, wonderful idea, Frank Brainerd, the founder of OpSail and the curator of the American Merchant Marine Museum. Right. And I've got with me another sea expert, and we're going to let them do a lot of the talking, Peter Neal, who's the president of South Street Seaport Museum, and also an incredible author and raconteur, author, novelist, fiction and nonfiction. Okay, Frank, this is your baby.
Okay.
Tell me how you feel right now.
I feel just tremendous. It's so wonderful to see it really happening after so many years of thinking about it and planning, and I don't care about the weather. You're right. Tall ships do look great in foggy weather like this. They look more real.
Well, they certainly are real. I've got a tough question for you, Frank. What is a tall ship? I mean, I think we all think we know what a tall ship is, but what is one?
There is no positive identification, but I always like to say a tall ship is a ship that is taller than she is long, as opposed to a steam vessel or a power craft, which is low and small.
Now, did you hear that? Did you hear that, Peter? Do you agree with that definition?
If Frank said it, make it so. That's the way it should be. There's always the apocryphal story in New York, at least, that a tall ship is one that can't get under the height of the Brooklyn Bridge, so she can't take the shortcut to Long Island Sound on her way to Boston. Otherwise, they've got to go around. It's a term that actually I think has a kind of a mixed blessing for us. People tend to focus on the tall ships, and what's wonderful about today is not only do we have 40 of the great larger ships, but we also have 200 or almost 300 Bs and Cs, what we call Bs and Cs, which are smaller vessels with equally distinguished history, and many of them operated by educational organizations and museums, and they represent in this country, as in Europe, really the heart of the preservation of our maritime heritage.
We talked about this as being the largest complement of tall ships ever assembled. And I understand, Frank, it's from 37 different countries. And somebody said, too, and I don't know whether this is going to happen, they expect 40,000 spectator craft out here today.
40,000, that's what we had in 1986, and there should be more today, I hope.
And a lot of those craft will be listening to us on the radio. And you can see, look at the pictures as we're talking now. You see how dense that fog is.
Yes.
Maybe we'll get a shot of New York City right behind us. By the way, we are on Governor's Island, and at the CPO Club, and right behind us is the Statue of Liberty, and off is Ellis Island behind us. And the tall ships will. Well, Frank, why don't you just tell us what's going to happen here at this event today?
Well, the Class A tall ships, the group of almost 40, will lead the procession. And they will be followed on either side by very important Class B ships, smaller but equally significant. That'll take the first, perhaps, hour. And then there'll be about 60 other Class B ships, followed by everything else you can possibly imagine, even kayaks, probably.
Now, what is a Class A ship?
A Class A ship, as Peter's just said, is a ship that is so big that she can't get under the Brooklyn Bridge. That's generally a very good definition. On the other hand, we have decided anything over 165 feet in length.
Okay, over
It's very
165
arbitrary.
feet.
Right, very
is
arbitrary.
a Class A
Yeah.
ship. And I guess we have 3/4 of all of the Class A ships in the world.
Right.
We're going to be
here
right behind us today.
Right, today. It's going to
Okay,
be
now
wonderful.
we have camera positions here on Governor's Island. Peter is a historian, among everything else. You want to
flatter
give
me.
us a little bit of the history of this place? So our cameras are on Governor's Island. Also atop the Coast Guard building. Let me just tell you where all the cameras are so everybody will know. And some of the cameras may not be activated yet because of the heavy fog, but they're going to be coming online. And there's one that I'm praying comes online, and that's our Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Lightship blimp. The ceiling is too low, ceiling meaning the cloud cover is too low. It looks like maybe it's only 100 feet right now. But WNYW Channel 5 is going to be in Battery Park atop the United States Coast Guard building. That's where that camera position is. This is perhaps the biggest television remote really in New York history. So this is all live. So if we mess up, we sure hope you're forgiving to us. We know you will be. But we're just going to have as much fun as we can. WABC is atop the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. We've got a lot of history on that. I've got this big book with all kinds of history and things, so I'm going to be reading from it. WPIX Channel 11 is at the Newport Center area. WWOR is at 79th Street Boat Basin. WCBS is at the Fort Lee side of the George Washington Bridge. WNET Channel 13, the public television station, our station, will be at Castle Williams and the press stand. So we're all here at Governor's Island. And the Virgin Atlantic Virgin blimp should be floating over us as soon as they let the thing up. Although the FAA, I don't think, wants it up right now because of the fog. And Channel 41 will be at Liberty State Park. So that's the whole story.
Isn't it great in a city that's known for its competitive ambiance, and that all of these competitors would pool their resources and do it very quickly and very competently. The professionalism has just been wonderful.
It is, and also everybody is basically doing it for nothing. I mean, they all said this is such an important event. When you really think about it, that the television stations in this community and the newspapers and many of the radio stations, WQXR is simulcasting this event, said this is so important for the people. Why is this so important?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. I think one thing to say just before we get into the more significant reasons is that one of the great things about OpSail it is practically devoid of commercialism. It is something that has tried very, very hard to keep the ships pure. We won't mention the name of the company that once put its logo on the forecourse of a full rig ship and was ridiculed by the full fleet, and it only took a minute or two before that logo came down.
Right.
Here is a tremendous example of authenticity and heritage, and I think that's wonderful in this world that is so rampant with tawdriness and vulgarity, that there's this wonderful parade of metaphors. These are pure metaphors for our longest tradition. When you think about it, the world was explored, it was developed, it was mapped, it was discovered by sea. And it's particularly true in our country. While we have no national maritime museum, we have maritime museums that are spread all over the river systems, down the three coasts, up through the Great Lakes, each one representing a tremendously interesting and unique regional culture, and it's the accumulation of them all that is the story of America's maritime heritage. New York Harbor is a perfect example. It is an extraordinary natural harbor, comparable with Sydney Harbor or Hong Kong Harbor, the great harbors of the world. It has a natural setting which has made it a very interesting place to take refuge in a storm. If you watch hurricane patterns historically, there's a veer away from New York Harbor. You have this tremendous confluence of the Sound and the East River and the Hudson River coming together with its natural opening to the sea. So the environment itself is extraordinary. Secondly, particularly after the War of 1812, New York became, in a way, the center of the world. It was the focus of the migration of goods and skills, people and ideas from all parts of the world to the so-called New World. And those waves of migration came primarily through New York, not just through Ellis Island. I think Ellis Island, which is behind us, and a great monument in and of itself of this migratory theme. But you have to remember that literally millions and millions of immigrants came through New York long before there was an Ellis Island. Ellis Island was just the culmination of that process, which of course is going on today. Mm-hmm. Wave after wave of new immigrants are coming, many by sea. Very interesting situation with Haitians and so-called boat people. Well, we were all boat people, and I think it's important that we remember that. New York actually became the center of the world by virtue, I'm told, of a price war. We cut the tariffs. Mm-hmm. And Boston and Philadelphia were the great ports at the time, and New York, in its typical competitive way, gave it to the world for less. And suddenly attention focused on New York, and we became the center of coastwise trade down along the Atlantic seaboard and to the islands in what is sometimes called the triangular trade. We also then, after the opening of the Erie Canal, was where the outlet to the hinterlands, to the heart of America, to the river systems and the Great Lakes, and then of course around the Horn on the great clipper ship passages around the Horn to San Francisco. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of immigrants, for example, went to California by ship as opposed to by Conestoga wagon. So we were really the center of trade, immigration, and the exchange of ideas. And it's made this city, well, we love it.
Here it is. And it certainly is the center of activity today, July 4th, 1992. And so is Peter's institution, the South Street Seaport. Well, he's going to be around, so we're going to have plenty of time.
Don't worry, Frank.
Now, Frank, this is your baby. Tell us how it happened, and then let's go back to my question about what will be happening today, what we will be seeing, and we'll show people a kind of little map of what will be happening. Tell us first how this whole idea germinated.
I was working for the American Merchant Marine Institute, representing 80 ship lines, now mostly defunct, I'm sorry to say. And my job was to try to get people interested in ships. And a good friend of mine was Commodore Smiling Jack Bayless of the Coast Guard. And one day he called up around 1962, 61, and said, there's a man just came down to the Coast Guard station and he has a good idea. He wants all the tall ships from the world to come to New York Harbor together on the same day. Mm-hmm. And his name was Nils Hansell. So we got the idea from Nils Hansell and Commodore Bayless and started from then. We put out a newsletter once or twice a month about which ships had accepted. We went to Lloyd's Register and got the lists of all the owners of the tall ships and wrote to all of them. First op sale happened in 1964. Only 24 ships. Most people didn't even know it was happening.
Yeah, that's right.
Took everybody by surprise. But, brother, it had an impact.
Well, there's obviously something magical about an idea that almost bizarre that it would turn into some huge international event of this proportion.
Thanks.
We're now going to join the main stage just a few hundred feet away here on Governor's Island for OpSail's official opening ceremonies. Over to the main stage.
Detail about face. Present arms. Please welcome His Royal Highness Don Felipe de Bourbon, the Crown Prince of Spain. You may be seated. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a series of selections by the U.S. Coast Guard Band, beginning with a march written by the band's conductor, Lieutenant Commander Lewis J. Buckley. The march, The Tall Ship Eagle. Will you please stand again, and will all military members salute during the rendering of honors?
For your national emblem, and it should be our national anthem. Obviously taken this out of context. A-flat version with a E-flat concert first. For your national emblem.
Ladies and gentlemen, performing the Star-Spangled Banner is country star Mac Davis, currently on Broadway in The Will Rogers Follies.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the city of New York. The official host of the United States celebration of this Columbus quincentennial, and I'm Walter Cronkite. This year, New York celebrating the 500th anniversary, of course, of the voyage of Christopher Columbus with a huge multi-ethnic festival. Fireworks, food, entertainment, spectacles, all of it, including one of the largest parades of tall ships in modern history. And even as we open the ceremonies here, the 3 Spanish galleons representing the replicas of the ships that Columbus brought to America are appearing on our near horizon, and you'll see them in a moment. The majestic image of the world's tall ships made a lasting impression on all of us who witnessed Operation Sail back in 1964 at the World's Fair here, at 76 and at 86. 1/2 hour from now, we will watch again, as in the phrase of the poet James Elroy Flecker, old ships sail like swans up the Hudson River in Operation Sail 1992. Almost 3,000 years ago, another poet spoke of the 1,000 ships launched by the beautiful Helen's Face, their sails filled with a fresh west wind singing over the wine-dark sea. In Homer's day, ships already at that time had played a key role in human civilization for more than 3,000 years. The Mediterranean was long the center of maritime development, And by the 15th century AD, southern European explorers, led by the Portuguese, were charting new waters as never before. But the greatest uncharted voyage of all may very well be history itself, with its many cunning passages, as T.S. Eliot had it. Although Columbus was a product of the vibrant civilization of the Mediterranean, his voyage helped shift the focus of Europe to the Atlantic, leading to the maritime dominance of England and France and the Netherlands. And so today, our celebration of the voyage of a Genoan who sailed from Spain in 1492 takes place on a river named for an Englishman who explored it under a Dutch flag in 1609. This diversity of ethnicities and nationalities continues in our America today. Indeed, the shrinking of the world and the increased contact between peoples is the greatest legacy of the Columbus voyage. And where better to celebrate it than in New York City, where so many different groups live side by side. Today, we also celebrate our great maritime tradition. In 1492, mariners linked the Americas to other lands, and for centuries, the United States has depended on sailors and ships for contact and trade with the other countries of the world. Since Columbus, millions have come to America on ships, many of them through Ellis Island over here, which marks its centennial this year, by the way. No major historical development is without pain, and the arrival of the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria out there now on these western shores is no exception. But in the wake of those three caravels also have followed some of the greatest developments in history, including the creation of what Abraham Lincoln called the last best hope of earth, our United States of America. For 500 years, people have attempted to assess the legacy of Christopher Columbus, and yet even now, it may be just a little early to do so, for we are a part of that legacy, and the history of our accomplishments is still an open book. If we finally achieve equality and opportunity and prosperity for all of our people, if we succeed in preserving our rivers and our forests, our golden seashores and our snow-capped mountains, if we continue to lead the way to international freedom and peace and tolerance, then surely the nations of the world will agree, America, America, God shed his grace on thee. And now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, representing our hosts here on Governor's Island, Admiral J. William Keim, Commandant of the United States Coast Guard.
Thank you, Walter. Prince Philip, Mayor Dinkins, Ambassador Mosbacher, other distinguished visitors and guests, and ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure this morning to welcome you to beautiful Governor's Island in the middle of New York Harbor, one of our largest Coast Guard installations. The United States has always been a maritime nation, and I think that it's very fitting that one of the kickoff events for our 4th of July celebration should be such a spectacular example of the true international cooperation and camaraderie that exists among seafarers around the world. I'm very proud that the United States Coast Guard Cutter Eagle, our tall ship that provides such wonderful training to the cadets at our Coast Guard Academy, is part of this magnificent event. I'm also extremely proud of the hundreds of men and women of our Coast Guard Reserve, and Coast Guard Auxiliary who are on duty here today to help make this regatta such a safe and enjoyable celebration of our maritime heritage. I'd also like to thank all the other organizations that have helped to keep the participants and spectators out of harm's way. Again, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Governor's Island, and on behalf of the Department of Transportation, the 39,000 men and women of the United States Coast Guard, to wish you all a hearty and happy 4th of July. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral Keim. With us today to offer our invocation is the Reverend Amy Cortese, pastor of Crossroads Tabernacle, a non-denominational church in the Castle Hill section of the Bronx.
Now that was my first prayer. We bless thee, O Lord, and we ask your blessing upon this glorious Operation Sail. From the four corners of the earth, you've gathered us. And this day we celebrate you bringing us together. We arrived from different places. We arrived with different faces. We arrived looking for a dream. We arrived hungry for peace. But you taught us, O Lord, that no man is an island, and each ship becomes a bridge to my brother's house across the vast expanse. May Operation Sail symbolize our highest desires. Like Columbus in search of a new world, like our forefathers daring to believe, may we today, red or yellow, black or white, reach out to each other, not in fear, but in love, not superior, but equal. Grant us, O Lord, thy blessing. And the people of the Lord say, Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Cortese. Next, we'll be entertained by Miss Melba Moore.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountain to the prairie to the ocean, white with fire. To the prairie, to the ocean, white with America, my home, sweet
Thank you, Ms. Moore. And now it's my privilege to introduce the man who needs no introduction, of course, the 106th Mayor of the City of New York, the Honorable David N. Dinkins.
Thank you, good friend Walter Cronkite. And I'm sure that I speak for all of us when I say that we can think of no finer master of ceremonies for this historic New York maritime event than you, sir. A great sailor, a great New Yorker, and a great chronicler of our times. On behalf of 8 million New Yorkers, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to our city for Operation Sail 1992. Thank you. May I take this opportunity to thank another great sailor, Ambassador Bus Mosbacher, not just for Op Sail 92, but also for Op Sail 86, 76, and 64, which meant so much to us all. Our celebration of the quincentennial has been marked by controversy over the meaning of 1492, and up to a point, that is a natural and healthy thing. But we must not get so caught up with what's behind us that we fail to look ahead. This is the greatest city in the greatest country in the world. And though we will never give up our efforts to make America better than it is, we must never fail to recognize that America is much better than it was. And so let us acknowledge the diversity of views about the voyage of Christopher Columbus to the Americas in 1492. But let us also say that amid those views, there is clearly much cause for celebration in New York City in 1992. The arrival of the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria sparked the greatest meeting of cultures in history. It is especially appropriate that we celebrate this in the city of New York, where 178 different cultures coexist. Every culture, every custom, and every cuisine is represented here. Throughout this great quincentennial celebration, we have been showcasing our diversity. And today, once again, the Statue of Liberty smiles her greeting. Almost you can see it. Smiles her greeting to people and ships from across the 7 seas. You know, I often say that your ancestors may have come to this country on the Mayflower, or they may have been among those who welcomed that ship. Your ancestors may have come here seeking religious freedom on ships that served as churches, or they may have come on immigrant ships fleeing persecution and seeking opportunity. Or your ancestors may have come whipped and chained in the holds of slave ships, as did mine. But irrespective of whether your ancestors were already here, and irrespective of the ships on which they came, we're all in the same boat now. And we must act as though we came together, and we must act as one. And so, as we celebrate this quincentennial of the historic voyage of Christopher Columbus, our focus is not just on the past, but on the future. Our emphasis is not just on the last 500 years, but on the next 500 years. And our eyes are fixed not just on those who came before us, but on those who come after us, especially our children. It is for their sake that the great multicultural experiment begun in 1492 must succeed. And with your help, it will succeed. Thank you all. God bless you. Keep the faith.
Mayor, thank you so much for hosting this weekend of celebration. Behind the weekend's many splendid events, of course, lie years of planning and preparation. It takes so much to put a big thing like this together. Much of that work has been performed by the New York City Columbus Quincentennial Commission. And here is the chairman of that commission, New York Stock Exchange President Richard Grasso.
Thank you, Walter. Your Excellency, Mayor Dinkins, Ambassador Mosbacher, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a great honor for me and my fellow commissioners to serve our city in planning New York's Columbus Quincentennial Celebration, a celebration to recognize one of the most significant events in history, an event which shaped the world as we know it today, the voyage of Columbus to the Americas 500 years ago. Mayor Dinkins, you personally, and the tireless efforts of your entire administration have once again proven that only the greatest city in the greatest country in the world is capable of producing an event such as this. Our six-day extravaganza demonstrates what can be accomplished when government and the private sector join in partnership. This celebration would not have been possible without the efforts of the distinguished members of the Commission who have generously given their time and extraordinary talents to this important project. I especially want to acknowledge and thank Deputy Mayor Barbara Fife, Community Board 1 Chair Ann Campaccia, and our Executive Director, Gail Johnson. And of course, the entire team at Op Sale 92, who have brought New York the largest assembly of tall ships ever, the centerpiece of our six-day celebration. Over the next few days, New Yorkers and visitors from all over the world will be treated to pyrotechnics, laser lights, music in the streets, and the best of New York's art and culinary offerings. I'm confident that by next Tuesday, when the tall ships sail away, we all will be left with memories of a fabulous celebration, a celebration that only New York City could produce. Finally, on behalf of my fellow commissioners and all New Yorkers, I want to thank you, Mayor Dinkins, for your leadership in our efforts and for once again showcasing to the world the uniqueness and pride we all share in our great town. Have a wonderful celebration, and thank you.
You know, each of these tall ships that we will see very shortly, coming as they do from all around the world, are ambassadors of their countries to the other peoples of the world, ambassadors of goodwill. Well, we're now about to hear the voices of New York City's youngest ambassadors of goodwill, the Boys Choir of Harlem.
Have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He
We will return to OpSale 92 and the Tall Ships Parade after this short break.
Joining together for us today.
OpSale 92, the Tall Ships Parade, is made possible by the Nynex family of companies. Raytheon. And World Yacht.
Celebrate July 4th at the United States Capitol with James Galway, Patti LuPone, Henry Mancini, E.G. Marshall, Julia McGinnis, and Mstislav Rostropovich conducting the National Symphony Orchestra, along with the largest fireworks display ever. Don't miss our Capitol 4th.
Tonight at 8.
You're watching member-supported public television, Channel 17, Schenectady, Albany, Troy.
The following is a WMHT Reaction Line program. We welcome your comments on this program at any time during or after the broadcast at area code 518-356-5555. Thank you for sharing your reactions with us.
OpSale 92, the Tall Ships Parade, is made possible by the Bank of New York. Chubb Group of Insurance Companies. Goya Foods. And McGraw-Hill.
Welcome back to OpSale 92, the Tall Ships Parade. I'm your guide, Bill Baker. Frank Brainerd, the man who founded this, is talking with me now. Frank, tell us about the red, white, and blue fire spurters that we see going.
That brings back a real choice memory from '76. Everything seemed to be going great. The day before it happened, 3 uniformed firemen came into the office and said, "We have a serious problem."
What's that?
I said, "What is it?" And they said, "We've learned how to make red, white, and blue water." And I said, "What the heck's the problem?" And they said, "We have no money. It costs $80 for the dye." So we gave them the $80, and there you have the result. Red, white, and blue water.
That's really quite a sight. Let's go now back to the Tall Ships Parade as we rejoin the opening ceremony.
And that slashes.
We just saw the U.S. Coast Guard three-masted bark Eagle. It was originally built for the German Navy in 1936 and survived World War II to become a prize in every sense. In June of 1946, she sailed from Bremerhaven in Germany to New London, Connecticut, weathering a hurricane off Bermuda, and she has been a training vessel of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy ever since. All Academy cadets get to sail Eagle, working her 21,350 square feet of sail and more than 5 miles of rigging in 5-week summer cruises and a 1-week training exercise, as well as visits to foreign ports. In 1987 and 88, she sailed to Australia as the host vessel. Eagle comes to OpSail after visits to Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, and other locations with 150 cadets, male and female, as well as 50 professional sailors and a dozen officers. What do you think, Frank? What do you think about it?
I think she's just tremendous. It's wonderful. Frankly, it's great to see that stripe on there. That was caused a lot of controversy when it first was created.
What's the controversy?
Well, people said it destroyed her looks. They just didn't like it. It was not usual. But it was the idea of President John F. Kennedy.
And how did he have that idea?
He spoke to the Coast Guard because all his family had Cape Cod, had houses on Cape Cod. And he said to the Coast Guard, I have so many children and relatives who have children. I want a distinguishing mark on a Coast Guard boat to show that that's a Coast Guard boat in case my kids get in danger. And the Coast Guard thought up that sign and put it on every boat they have. And it solved the problem.
Bill, let me jump in on one thing. I think it's important for our viewers, if you can see, the tall ships are in the middle of the line, but there are very important ships on both sides. And on either side of the Eagle, we have the Spirit of Massachusetts, which is a replica of a fishing schooner that is owned by Boston, Massachusetts, as an emissary of the city of Boston. Of course, there's going to be another great OpSail event a week from now in Boston. And then on the other side, of course, is the Pride of Baltimore II, which is the vessel that represents the Spirit of Baltimore, Maryland, another great maritime city. Pride of Baltimore, of course, is the second Pride. The first one was lost at sea. And I think we should remember, as we celebrate this great heritage, that it's a very dangerous life. When we look at these pictures with this in the fog, the fog is almost like a veneer of romance. But one of the things I think we have to remember is that this is not really a romantic life, and it's a very dangerous life. And we probably, those of us who are in this movement and business, must remember that. We're aware of it all the time, safety at sea. And we would like to remember the sailors of the first Pride, who were great people, great friends. When the ship was lost, there was this tremendous outpouring, and particularly in Baltimore. The city of Baltimore just coalesced as a community, and they built a second ship. And the second ship is a spectacular replica of the Baltimore Clipper, and she sails a world itinerary now representing Maryland and the city of Baltimore all across the Atlantic. So as we're looking at the tall ships, I hope we won't forget to look at the vessels on either side.
Good. You're right about that, Peter, and part of what this is, that this magic is, that how a thing like a big ship can pull an entire community together, can capture the heart of a community. I was living in Baltimore at the time, and it really was the spirit of Baltimore, and it's almost inexplicable unless you're really there experiencing it.
Well, and it's happening more and more. There's a vessel that's not here today, the Californian, which sails the West Coast. This is a great East Coast event, but I think we have to remember the tremendous maritime heritage of the West Coast, San Francisco, and of course Los Angeles, San Diego, Seattle, Vancouver and Victoria, tremendous heritage, and all of those ports have their own tall ships. There's a kind of explosion of construction and replication, and it's wonderful to see.
This is the Denmark, Bill. This is the second major ship in the procession, the second Class A, named Denmark. In World War II, when World War II began, she was in America from Denmark for the World's Fair. Her captain, Captain Hansen, realized that war was happening in Europe, and he said, I am not going home. The Christian Radic went home and was seized and captured and sunk, but the Denmark stayed here, went down to Florida. He lived off the land for 3 years. Somehow, nobody knows how he did it. And the day war began, Pearl Harbor, he called President Roosevelt and said, I offer you my ship.
time for me to tell you which ship will have phone contact.
Not sure which ship will have phone contact.
Give my regards. Broadway is the music we're listening to in the background. As you can tell, we're not making an attempt to give you an exact play-by-play of this event. We want you to sit back and relax and feel the mood that we feel here. So this is not a television event, even though it's a live television broadcast. This is not an event that we're trying to give you to fill every second of the air with our chatter. We want to fill every second of the air with beautiful music and a feeling of the importance and beauty of this live experience that we're all having this July 4th, 1992. We've changed guests here out here at Governor's Island. We have now another maritime museum operator, one of the greatest maritime museums in the world. We have its president, Revel Carr. The museum is the Mystic Seaport Museum.
Indeed.
Revel, thank you for being here. And we have Captain Ernst Cummings, the former commander of the Eagle. Captain Cummings is one of the great sailors. I'm so envious, Captain. Although I looked at you, Captain, I said, you must be an admiral, and you said...
I said, I wish I were an admiral because they make more money, but...
Okay, now, Captain, we have a direct live connection, and you should hear. I don't know whether you have an earphone on or not, but I at least can hear. We have on the telephone Vice Admiral Paul Welling, commander of the Coast Guard of the Atlantic area, and he's sitting or standing or something on the Eagle. Vice Admiral Welling, can you hear me? He can probably hear me, but I can't hear him.
I apologize for the delay, but...
Well, I think he's trying to hear me. I'm sure that, you know, we've got you can't believe the connection and jumble of wires that we have here. And I think it's amazing that any of this it's amazing we have a picture at all. By the way, too, the New York skylines just start, I'm looking over at the main harbor area right behind us, and the skyline's just starting to clear. Maybe we're about halfway up the World Trade Center building.
No, let me add something. Vice Admiral Welling was the commanding officer in Eagle here in New York in 1976 for the bicentennial tall ship parade. And he led the parade in 1976 when he was the captain on Eagle.
Now, you were the captain of the Eagle. You have a real sea career. You've been on just about every ship that the Coast Guard has. You were, what, 4 or 5 years the captain of the Eagle?
It was 5 years, Bill, and it was a wonderful tour of duty to be able to do something like that and even get paid for it.
What are the hazards? What's it like? I mean, it seems like just a dream to me.
Well, there were many things that fulfilled boyhood dreams, but then when you're sailing a tall ship, you always have to be on your toes for rapid weather changes. When you're in piloting waters in close to land, you have to be on your toes for sudden current shifts or things like that. So it's one of constant vigilance.
Okay, now we're going to try another telephone. The first one didn't work, but we're going to try another telephone conversation. The ship, the Danmark, is somewhere just behind me, Revel and Captain. And let's go now to the captain of the Danmark. and we'll be going to him in just a few seconds. And tell us a little, Revel. Can you tell us a little about the ship, the Danmark?
Yes. Well, she was an interesting vessel that was built in Denmark and over in this country during the 1930s, prior to the outbreak of the Second World War, and she made the fortunate decision not to head back to Europe, and therefore was not captured when Denmark was overrun. And so she stayed in this country during the war, and in fact stayed at the Coast Guard Academy. And it was that experience, I think, of having the Danmark there at the Academy that awakened the Coast Guard to the benefits of having a tall ship of their own, and led directly to the Eagle's acquisition after the war. The Denmark and the Coast Guard Academy have had a wonderful, close relationship. She was there just last year, and it's a fascinating vessel. The youngsters still live in hammocks on board, for example.
Now, Captain, do you have any thoughts about the Danmark? Did you have much experience with her and what she stands for?
We've had some very close relationships with Denmark. One interesting thing which Revel just alluded to was during World War II, when she was stationed at the Coast Guard Academy as a training vessel for our cadets, she flew 3 flags. She flew the Danish flag, the U.S. flag, and the Coast Guard flag. And I don't know of many ships that have ever done that before.
Captain, what's the reason? You know, this is 1992. Those ships sail with air. We've got steam, we've got diesel, we've got atomic power. Why tall ships in 92?
A question that's asked quite frequently, Bill. The easiest way to answer that one, and simplest way, would be on a diesel-powered ship or a steam-powered ship, you can order the engine order telegraph to what speed you want to do. You could order the helm to steer whatever course, and it'll immediately react. On a tall sailing ship, or any sailing ship, you have to utilize the wind and the superhuman powers of the wind and harness them in order to propel your vessel. And it may not always be in the direction you want to go, especially with tall ships, which can only sail about 60 degrees off the wind. And it's the leadership aspect. On tall ships, we can put our cadets into leadership positions, and the experience they get in those positions in running that ship and manning those sails and adjusting those sails is one they can't get anywhere else in the world.
Does anybody get hurt doing that, Captain?
Unfortunately, occasionally on the tall ships, people do get hurt, but it's the safety records are very, very good.
We've got the Libertad, I think, there on the screen. Very impressive. An Argentine Naval Academy vessel. And she's, again, one of the largest here, now almost 370 feet. She's been, the Academy there has been in existence for almost 120 years, so that the Libertad is carrying on a strong tradition of their Naval Academy.
It's Argentina's big full-rigged ship. It was launched from the Navy shipyard in Rio Santiago in 1960 and promptly made a 6-month maiden voyage to Puerto Rico and then to Lisbon and then Le Havre and then Hamburg, Germany, London and Cadiz and then Dakar. Okay, I think we now have the captain of the tall ship Danmark, Captain Foshammer. Captain, can I say your name properly? Captain, hello. Captain Foshammer, can you hear us? I hear him. He's giving commands. I think he's probably busy steering the ship or commanding the ship. You don't steer it from where the captain commands. He doesn't steer it, does he?
He gives helm commands to the people on the helm or steering wheel, and they execute those commands. But the captain himself does not steer the ship.
Okay. In front of we've been seeing the caravels, and because it was part of the big ceremony, Revel, the caravels are the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria. Right. Nina, as Mayor Dinkins said properly. And just then the sun started coming out too.
Can I interrupt for a moment?
Yes,
There's
please.
a wonderful view of the figurehead there. I believe that's on Libertad. And it's a point of distinction about these ships, and it's something we could talk about at a later point in the program. But while it was on, I wanted to mention figurehead so people know what we're talking about later on. So excuse me, Bill.
Oh, no, please, thank you.
Let's go back to
yeah. Let's talk about and let's talk about the caravels. As we were coming to Governor's Island, my wife and I and some of the people in the car said, "Oh, look at those little ships," and those are of course much smaller than the originals must have been. And the answer is
no. And the other answer is a huge amount of research has been done on those vessels, but there still is a vague question as to precisely how were they built, what are their dimensions, what is their rig. A great deal of research has been done. A man named Martinez Hidalgo in Spain was the key researcher, but others have worked hard on the subject as well. A fellow named John Sarsfield has researched building techniques and found that in the coast of Brazil they are still using a technique that is very similar to the technique that was used in the 15th century. So there's another Nina around here. It's called Santa Clara. Nina was originally named Santa Clara, and they built one in Brazil, and I think she's out here somewhere. And again, she may be one of the most authentic of the vessels because she was built the way they were built.
Okay, we're going to give it. Our people are relentless, and we're going to try again to talk on the telephone to Captain Fosamer on the tall ship Denmark. Captain, can you hear us?
Just 1 second, please. He is right here. He is right with us now. Here's Captain Fosamer.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, Captain. How are you doing?
Fine.
Well, give us your impression from standing on the deck or wherever you are on the ship. Over.
I'm very close to the bridge. Over.
You're very close to what?
I'm standing at the bridge and deck side, and we are on the full sail, celebrate the 500 years of Christopher Columbus.
Captain, how do you feel right now?
We have just passed the Governor's Island, and we have salute for the Liberty. Statue of Liberty, and we have salute for your president. And as far as I can see, we are very welcome here into New York and to America.
Thank you, Captain. What an exciting thing to talk to you.
I have one cadet because I will be busy now, but I have one cadet on behalf of all the other will maybe tell you about the Vikings. Over. And you must have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye, and thank you, Captain. That was wonderful. I don't know whether you probably couldn't hear the captain, but he was telling me that he was standing very near the bridge. And now, Captain Cummings, when you were there, explain to us what all that means, standing near the bridge and etc.
There's an area of the ship that we call the bridge, and that is the area of the ship which you run the ship from. It has the orders for the engine. Most of these ships are under power right now because they all have auxiliary engines and there's no wind today. That has the helm or steering mechanism, and all the communications for the ship are in this area, and that is where the captain is, or the conning officer, whoever is conning the ship, will give their orders to the people on the helm or the engine order telegraph to make the ship go in the proper direction and speed.
Captain, we're going to use a lot of nautical terms here, and even someone like myself who's loved and dreamt about ships and read about them virtually all my life, I get very confused and I haven't the foggiest idea of what a bark, a barkentine, exactly what a tall ship is compared to. I know a difference between a sloop and something else, but can you simplify some of this for us?
Well, it's some of these. Look at these tall ships out here today. And like Eagle, we'll take Eagle for instance. We can recognize that one because it's the one with the beautiful red and blue stripe on both bows to distinguish it. That is a bark. It's a three-masted bark, which basically means its foremast and middle mast or mainmast are rigged with sails on yard arms, which are square sails, and fore and aft sails. And its third mast is rigged only with fore and aft sails. That is a bark. Another prevalent ship rig here today is the full-rigged ship.
Captain, we'll get back to that because we have another telephone conversation we're going to try, and this is going to be talking to your friend Vice Admiral Paul Welling, Commander of Coast Guard Atlantic Area, and he's on board the Eagle. Vice Admiral Welling, can you hear us?
Sure can. Who am I speaking to?
This is Bill Baker, and we're on Governor's Island, and we're telecasting this program to the entire world.
Great.
Want to give us a greeting to everybody and tell us what's going on?
Well, good morning. We're northbound in the Hudson around Pier 45 as we were approaching the harbor this morning in rain and mist, low overhead. We could just see Manhattan, the lower 20 stories or so, but it's burning off here. The sun's out, and it's great. We've got all or nearly all of the sails set with absolutely no wind, and of course we're doing that so that the people on the beach will have an idea of what sailing ships really do look like. It would be nice, I'm sure the captain would love to have a favorable wind so we could actually be sailing rather than motoring. But it's great to be aboard Eagle. She looks great. Captain Wood's been doing a super job. The cadets are standing at parade rest along the starboard side, looking out at New York City and anxiously awaiting the Liberty Call.
I understand you were a commander of this ship in '76, is that correct?
Bill, I took over in August of '76, right after the big doings here in New York, and had the good fortune to command her for 4 years. And it was a great experience. It's the first time I've been back aboard with sails up, and it's great fun.
How does this compare with '76?
Well, '76 was exciting. There weren't as many tall ships here, and then I don't believe. The weather was a little nicer, I think. But I think this is going to break out to be a lovely day.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Vice Admiral Paul Welling, Commander of the Coast Guard Atlantic Area, speaking to us live from the Coast Guard Bark Eagle.
Okay.
Now, back to Captain Ernst Cummings again. Captain Cummings, one of the things we haven't described, and we have a little graphic to show, the ships are all amassed in this huge parade of sail that's 11 miles long, starting at the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, coming up here past Governor's Island and the Statue of Liberty, past the base of Manhattan called the Battery, and then up the Hudson River. Can you kind of give us the parade route so people can get a fix on what this is?
Well, I think you've done a very good job of it. The boats started out down by Sandy Hook, New Jersey early this morning, where they were at anchorage for the night. The Eagle was underneath the Verrazano Bridge at 9 o'clock to start the parade of sail. And here, a beam of Governor's Island, between Governor's Island and the Statue of Liberty at 10 o'clock. They will proceed up the Hudson River, past the west side, to the just south of the George Washington Bridge, when they will turn and come back down to their anchorages both on the Manhattan side and the Brooklyn side.
Okay, so we're going to watch all 11 miles of these ships go by, and we're going to take it easy. We're going to comment whenever we can. We're going to let this beautiful music play, and we're going to leave it to our experts. Revel Carr, head of the Mystic Seaport Museum, go.
Well, it's a little hard in the bright light here as we look at a monitor, but it looks to me like that's Concordia that was on there a moment ago with the Canadian maple leaves on its sails. Concordia is part of a training program, the West Island College in Quebec, and she's a new vessel, and so it's a welcomed addition to the fleet. As I say, it's a little hard from our vantage point to be able to tell what we're seeing on the screen. But in any case, this is part of the sail training experience, but also an educational experience for young people. High school age students, I believe, are the primary target of this particular program, to give them that experience both at sea, but an academic program as well. We saw earlier the Corwith Kramer, which is one of the vessels of the Sea Education Association, and SEA does training of college-age youngsters at sea, and they have two vessels, the Westward and Corwith Kramer, and this is one of those opportunities for students today in this country to have college-level maritime training. We do it as Mystic as well with our Williams College Mystic Seaport program, and our students go to sea on the Westward as part of that program.
You mentioned the Concordia. It was built in Poland in 1991, which is kind of shocking, you know, to think that they are still building tall ships this deep almost into the 21st century. It was built for the West Island College of Pointe Claire, Quebec, Canada. It's the world's newest sail training vessel, commissioned by a new maritime college, and the new maritime college opens up it will have its first class in September. We're reading from the Op Sail 92 booklet, so I'm not as smart as I may appear at some of this, but certainly Captain Cummings is smart. What do you see, Captain? Any thoughts?
Well, one thing you just mentioned there, Bill, was it's amazing that a tall ship would be built in this day and age with steam and diesel powered, but more and more tall ships are being built every year. There is a tall ship on the ways in Poland right now being built. There are more tall ships in the world today than there were in 1986. I believe in 1976 and 1964 with the tall ship parades in New York and the exposure the tall ships got worldwide, that has been a resurgence in the love of tall ships, a resurgence in people realizing what tall ships can do, not only for the training of our young cadets, but just for the hearts and minds of all the peoples of the world.
I'm sorry, the pictures aren't as absolutely clear as we would like them, and it's not because our equipment's bad. It's because it's a foggy morning here live in New York Harbor. But the sun has come out. It's starting to burn through, so as this parade wears on, the picture should get clearer and clearer and more beautiful, and maybe even the airship will get up. We mentioned, I think, the Gamage, which has an all-female crew. Revel, do you know much about that?
Well, the Harvey Gamage was built in the early 70s, named for the builder of the vessel from East Boothbay, Maine. Harvey Gamage has built a number of ships. In fact, I think the Bill of Rights that he also built is behind us just now. But the Harvey Gamage gives that kind of at-sea sailing experience to people of all ages. She works in New England during the summers and the Caribbean during the winter. The Bill of Rights is, as I mentioned, another Harvey Gamage vessel, but she's part of the Vision Quest program, and that's a group of several vessels that take troubled youngsters, people who've had encounters with the law and so on, to sea, again, to have that experience of teamwork, working together, depending upon each other. And the Vision Quest program has been, I think, very effective. They have both the Bill of Rights and the New Way. Years ago, one of the hazards that I know Captain Cummings is sensitive to are hurricanes, as we at Mystic Seaport Museum are, and we've got an exposure because we're low and close to the water. When a hurricane comes, we have a major effort to secure the museum. At one occasion, the vessel that's now called the New Way, she was then called Western Union, was there with her Vision Quest youngsters on board. And those kids who, as I say, were troubled youngsters, had problems with the law, they pitched in, they helped us at the museum button her down for the storm, and it was terrific to have that kind of response from youngsters who had no connection with the place at all.
It's interesting. Revel, you just mentioned storms. Now, Captain, you must have been through every conceivable thing. You know, all I do is sit in my living room reading in my easy chair about great sea storms. Want to give us some stories?
Probably. Well, let me give you two stories. One that Revel mentions, hurricanes at Mystic Seaport, and what a danger they can be. Mystic Seaport has been able to, or the Coast Guard Academy has been able to send people over to Mystic Seaport to help them secure before a hurricane comes. And it has been good for our young cadets to go over there and work with the community in helping the seaport secure for a hurricane. But probably one of the most, I don't want to say famous or infamous storms was right after this Op Sail cover. This was a picture of the start of the race in 1984 from Bermuda to Halifax. And the weather around Bermuda was very unsettled. A lot of line squalls, a lot of storms, very unsettled weather. That evening, As we were well en route to Halifax, we saw some line squalls coming in on our radar. I had to call the crew to full sail stations, and while we were at full sail stations, we got hit with a microburst of about 80 to 90 knots, which pushed that big vessel over on its side to about 60 degrees. Fortunately, we did not lose anybody, but that was an exciting moment.
That was just after this picture was taken, I guess.
About,
is that right?
4 or 5 hours after that picture was taken, yes, sir.
That your ship almost went over.
Well, it heeled over quite a bit. It's a very safe ship, but when you don't expect it right away and it happens with a microburst, it can be an unsettling moment, to say the least.
Revel, do you see any ships out there you want to talk about?
Well, I was there. We don't have anything, any of our tall ships on our screen at the moment, but let's see who's out there now. Again, it's a little hard to make out. But
Esmeralda.
Looks like Esmeralda. Yeah. All right. We've got.
Is that right behind us? The Esmeralda. Is that it?
Yeah,
Passing
Esmeralda.
the Statue of Liberty right now.
Yeah, four-masted barkentine out there. Yeah, she's on our screen, and she's from Chile. One of the vessels built after the war in 1946. Part of the problem with Esmeralda was a fire that raced through the shipyard when she was built. She was originally built, I think, for the Spanish, but there was a major fire, and she was gutted. And there was a period when there was question whether to scrap the hull, but they did decide to bring her back and added 20 feet to the hull. And she was purchased by the Chilean Navy, so she now is home ported down in Valparaiso.
She's the sister ship to Spain's Juan Sebastian de Elcano. And she's a beautiful ship. Captain Cummings, we began, and I had to cut you off. We began talking about, we only discussed what a bark was. And why don't we start explaining that again? And I think we could take our time and explain it all. So, let's go through all of these tall ships so we kind of get the message again. I'm a little slow. We'll have to drill it into me.
Well, the bark was on, let's take Eagle for an example, a 3-masted bark. You can also have a 4-masted bark or a 5-masted bark, but you don't see them very often, at least the 5-masted ones. The bark is when the first 2 masts on a 3-masted vessel have squaresails on them, and the last mast, or the mizzen mast, is only rigged with fore and aft sail. The next most popular vessel of the big tall ships out here would probably be the full-rigged vessel. You look at
like the Christian Radich. We'll see that.
It's a full-rigged vessel. That means she has square rigs on all her masts, all 3 of her masts.
So there's no triangular sail, it's all those big square sails on all masts.
They have triangular sails also, but they have the square sails on all masts. That's a full rig vessel.
Okay, and then give me some, I know there are more.
Well, you have schooners here. A classic example, of course, is Canada's wonderful Blue Nose 2. Basically just a fore and aft sailed vessel. She has no yard arms, therefore no square-rigged sails, or no square sail. If you remember those 3, those are probably the 3 basic ones you need to know. There are other ones like a barkentine, which only the foremast will be square-rigged, and the mainmast and aftermast, or mizzenmast, will be fore and aft rigged. Now, I'm sure I have confused everybody.
You want anything, Revel?
No, it is bewildering, and ideally, if we had a chart that showed each one of them and could point to the sails, I think it might remove a little bit of the mystery. But as Captain Cummings was just saying, the Esmeralda is an example of one of those barkentines, 4-masted with fore and aft sails on everything but the foremast. I must say, I have the privilege, going back to our Hurricane in the Coast Guard Academy, I have the privilege of presenting the class flag to the incoming class of the Academy each year. It's been a tradition that we've carried on for many years. And when I speak to the incoming class, I remind them that we are very happy to have them at the museum at any time, but I hope I don't have to invite them back to help us in hurricanes. But each year they're prepared, semper paratus, they are prepared, and they do come to our rescue from time to time, and they're a great help when they come to the seaport.
We're on Governor's Island. Governor's Island is the biggest Coast Guard base, I guess, in the world.
Yes, sir, it certainly is. And it is located in a magnificent spot, of course, right here off the Battery, south tip of Manhattan.
Do you know how many people are here?
If I will guess, and I will probably be wrong, but I believe that Governor's Island, with its military independence, is roughly 5,000 people, 5,000 to 6,000 people.
This has long been a military base, really. I guess as far back as anybody can remember. Do we know much about the history of Governor's Island?
Personally, I don't know an awful lot about it. I'm sure
we'll
historian here. Yes, Peter will know about it. It was a military fort since way back when the Dutch were here.
We're just across from the Statue of Liberty, and we're sitting here live in New York Harbor on 1992, July 4th. And I have some interesting facts about New York Harbor that I thought about New York that you might enjoy. First, we don't know that Columbus and other world explorers ventured out of Europe, what their exact routes were. But on that basis, we know that a number of explorers came up this way. For example, Verrazano was probably the first. He was a Florentine navigator, and he was the first person to to kind of come up this way. And he was really working for somebody else, and they didn't want to keep paying. It was, I guess, really the French silk merchants. He was looking for a way to get through the United States, so he didn't want to hang around. He didn't want to hang around in this area. Henry Hudson. By the way, Verrazano got up here in 1524, and we'll talk about the Verrazano Bridge, where one of our camera positions is located, which is the bridge linking Brooklyn and Staten Island, which is named, of course, in his memory. Then Henry Hudson, the Englishman, looking over the area in 1609, and interests of the Dutch trading interests came up this way, and he interested people back home to maybe do something. And back around 1620, as I recall, this island of Manhattan, with all of those huge buildings on it right now, I think had 3 farms and a windmill.
You recall that, do you?
Walter, thank you for coming back. Walter, you're the seaman. Why don't you? And I know you and Captain Cummings are such good friends. Why don't you go for it?
You can't possibly introduce me in the presence of Captain Cummings as a seaman, for heaven's sakes. I'm a landlubber compared to Captain Cummings.
Walter is the dean of American sailing.
Well, if you mean the oldest, you're probably right. Even that wouldn't count. I know some very old men are out there on boats. What a great day this is. When the Eagle comes by, are you able to suppress a little bit of a tear in the corner of your eye of emotion when she sails by leading these great parades of ships?
I think you have caught my emotions, Walter, very well. It brings back fond memories of '86 when you and I sailed up this same parade route to a wonderful day, and again today another wonderful day.
I was with you in '86 doing a little broadcasting on that day, and '76 doing the anchor job for the whole 4th of July, and each time I see that beginning of this parade of ships, I choke up a bit.
Sure.
The same thing happened at the ceremony there this morning. She came by. Incidentally, I don't know whether you were carrying the ceremony bill at the time, but it didn't carry the whole thing. But you know, an incredible thing, and Captain Cummings can tell us how difficult it is to do. But do you realize that on their schedule was to have the Eagle pass that reviewing stand at 10:02:35, 35 seconds after 2 minutes after 10 o'clock, and she was there at 37. I think the Coast Guard has a lot to account for being 2 seconds late, but isn't that an incredible performance? You got tides and wind conditions, and today certain observation problems and to make that schedule, I think it's unbelievable.
I think a lot of credit has to go to Dave Wood, the captain on Eagle, and his navigator. If you remember in '86, the Secret Service told us to have it there at that point between the President and the Statue of Liberty at 9:58:27 or something like that. And I think we laughed a little bit, saying that'd probably be impossible. Well, we'll give it our best shot. Because we didn't want Ambassador Mossbacher turning around and saying, "Mr. President, I present your Eagle," and not having it there.
Well, his script today was to turn around and present the Eagle to Secretary Card, but unfortunately the ceremony ran so much longer than it was supposed to. It got started a little late that we had to kind of fill around that point. But it was but the Eagle was there right when it was supposed to be.
And she looked magnificent. And that throws me back to some of your words, if you remember, Walter, back in 1976. The Eagle was going to be the only Coast Guard vessel that wasn't going to have the stripe. So for the parade of sails, we painted this red and blue stripe on the Eagle. And when it went by, if I can quote you and remember correctly, you said, "You can certainly pick out our magnificent, beautiful Eagle with that wonderful stripe on her." That statement set that stripe on the ship for the rest of its life. Thank you.
I hope that I'm to be complimented for that. I don't know. There are some purists who still don't believe that stripe ought to be there.
We're talking about the Eagle, and that's the Eagle arriving at 79th Street, at the 79th Street Boat Basin, Walter. Nobody knows that, or not many people know it, but New York City actually has a little home port where a lot of people live and live on their boats. Walter, you have a boat, and I guess we have to call it a boat compared to these big ships.
Well, of course.
Want to tell us about your
yacht.
vessel, your yacht?
You know what the definition of a yacht is, Bill? If a man thinks his boat's a yacht, it's a yacht.
You've written a beautiful book about your sails. What was your favorite trip, and where are you headed next?
Well, I think I've got to be in the spirit of the occasion today and say that my favorite trip was on the Eagle from London to Leningrad in '89. Wow. Not with Captain Cummings, but with Captain Woods. It was a wonderful trip, of course, to be going into the Soviet Union still at that time as a goodwill venture, not with guns blazing, but with flags flying, and to a great welcome. It was a marvelous occasion. Although you heard about that trip, I guess, that for the first time in the history of the North Atlantic and the Skagerrak and the Baltic, there wasn't a whisper of wind for 9 days.
Wow.
I know the North Sea from World War II only too well, and I have never seen it in that condition. Absolute mill pond. It got into 80 degrees aboard on the North Sea. Everybody's prepared for winter weather, and although it was in June, but it's very cold there normally in June on the North Sea. It was hot, so hot that the summer clothes were called for. Nobody had any aboard for that trip. But the last day, here we had the cadets aboard to give them sail training, and they hadn't had a chance to unfurl a sail. The last day, naturally, we got up to 20 knots or so, dead on the nose. Now the schedule calls for getting into Leningrad, and we're in the Gulf of Finland. But Captain Woods said these people came to do some training on the sails, and we're going to sail. So we sailed for 12 hours, and we made good 4 miles up and back just to get some sailing done.
But that's always good to get the ship under power, or under sail, and shut the engine down and just sail under the superhuman power of the wind. That's always a good feeling. Perhaps
I've always said there are two magnificent sounds on board a sailing ship. The first one is when they shut down the engines. That's the greatest sound of all. But almost equal to that is when you need the engines and they start again.
Very true, Walter, very true. Perhaps it was your visit on the Eagle that started the political renovation in the Soviet Union.
They were afraid of the cannon that the ship didn't have. By the way, behind us is the Statue of Liberty. Behind us on Governor's Island, it's the majestic copper sculpture towering above Liberty Island at the entrance of New York Harbor. We've all seen it. We all know what it is. But it has a lot of different names. Liberty Enlightening the World. Nicknames include, that's its official name, I might add. Miss Liberty was used, of course, in Irving Berlin's show. Goddess of Liberty, Lady Liberty, Miss Freedom, and of course the popular Statue of Liberty. I live in this city, Walter, and I think the last time I went over to the Statue of Liberty was when I came when I was a high school student from Cleveland, Ohio. The idea of the statue came from a prominent French politician and historian as a joint monument dedicated to the French and American colonists who fought together for independence in the Revolutionary War. It celebrated the ideal of liberty and served as a symbol of friendship between the two nations. French sculptor Bartholdi designed the statue and chose its site. He hoped to present the statue to the United States on the centennial of the Declaration of Independence, but the statue was not ready. Instead, the complete right hand and torch were presented and displayed at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. Upon final completion, the statue was disassembled in Paris, packed into 214 wooden crates, and then shipped to the U.S. for reassembly. The statue was dedicated October 28, 1886, by President Grover Cleveland and Count Ferdinand representing France. By the way, England refused to be present at the dedication. In 1924, it was proclaimed a national monument by President Calvin Coolidge. In 1986, the huge restoration was completed, and later in 1991, it welcomed over 4 million visitors. We are now, Walter Cronkite and I are now joined by our mayor, the mayor of the city,
Hi.
David Dinkins.
Happy to be with you.
Thank you, thank you.
And Walter do a great job today, as usual.
We're trying. We're trying. We're very proud of our port. Tell us about your pride and what all of this means to you, David.
Well, it means an awful lot to me. One, it enables me to make the point that I so often make, that our city is not a melting pot, but a gorgeous mosaic. I was taught when I went to school in Harlem many years ago that we were a melting pot, but we're not. We really are what I call a gorgeous mosaic. We have 178 separate ethnic identities. And this occasion, while controversial to some degree, permits one to make the point that Walter makes so very well, that 1492, the voyage of Christopher Columbus, made the world smaller. And it was really the start of a multicultural society, world. And the way I phrase it is to say that some of us, our ancestors, may have come on the Mayflower. Others of us had ancestors who were here to greet those ships. Some came fleeing persecution, seeking freedom of religion. My ancestors came in the holds of slave ships and in chains. The point is, irrespective of the ships on which we may have come or whether we were here to greet those ships, we're all in the same boat now. And if we appreciate that and really try to understand and respect one another, we will all do better.
This city is very beautiful from this perspective, Mayor.
Isn't it?
It's very beautiful in almost every perspective. But you've got one of the toughest jobs in the world. As a matter of fact, I guess if this city, New York City, were its own country, I guess it would be about the 6th or 7th biggest country in the world, right after Sweden or something.
Pretty big. Yeah, pretty big. And just looking at our budget of $30 billion, we're the largest budget in this country, with the exception of the federal government and states of New York and California. So we are big, and I have a big job, but I have a lot of help. I have the best people in the world. They're wonderful. New Yorkers are just great people. And the image of us that some have as cynics and unkind people is just not true. It is not true. And we see it not only at times of celebration like this, but we see it when someone's in trouble. When someone has a problem and New Yorkers crowd around, complete strangers, and they come to help. And I think the Democratic National Convention will help us. I'm not talking about I'm not making a political statement, but I mean in terms of economic development, opportunity to show our city in a positive light to the entire world. All this is good. This is not unlike 30,000 people thundering across the Verrazano Bridge in the marathon. The whole world sees that, and that's good. Tourism is $13 billion a year in New York City, and that's how we get revenue to take care of education and housing and health care and all the things that everyone cares about. So these things are really important. It's not just it's a celebration, and I love that, but it means so much more, and it's good today and into the future.
This is a metropolitan area of 15 or 16 million people. And I'm told, Mayor Dinkins, that through this port comes enough merchandise, tons and tons of it, and I've got the figures here, I'll look it up in a second, that there's literally a truckload for every individual every day moving through the port. What about the importance of this port to this economy, to this community?
Well, it's a very, very important port to the region. And that's why we've got to do all we can to protect our waterways, to keep them navigable, and to make certain that we improve them. And also, I'd like to see the people able to enjoy the waterways, which we can do. That's why it's important how we develop the west side of Manhattan, for instance.
I was told by the captain of the port here, who was asked a question. What do you think is the most frequently asked question to the captain of the Port of New York is, Mayor?
How deep the water is, maybe?
No, it's, can I sail a sailboard in the port? and you know what the answer is?
No, I guess.
No, the answer is yes.
Oh, you can?
You can do it, just have to stay out of the way of all the big ships.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I want to say...
Walter would know the answer to that. He's a sailor.
Walter's a sailor, and Walter, will you come back again? We're going to give you a little break, but will you come back again and visit with us before the end of this program?
Sure, I'd be honored and pleased to.
We're honored and pleased to have both of you. Thank you, Mayor Dinkins.
You bet.
Thank you, Walter Cronkite.
Thank you very much.
Sail 92, the Tall Ships Parade, is made possible by the NYC family of companies. Raytheon, and World Yacht.
During July, WMHT celebrates the achievements of athletes whose skill, determination, and courage have inspired and entertained us all. Join us for a month filled with exciting moments from sports. Share the fascinating stories of athletes and adventurers who've beaten the odds. and broken the records, who've turned tragedy into challenge and perseverance to gold. They're legends and they're hopefuls. They're champions and challengers. They've made headlines and they've made history. They've shown us that anything is possible. You're watching member-supported public television, Channel 17, Schenectady, Albany, Troy.
Op Sale 92, the Tall Ships Parade, is made possible by the Bank of New York, Chubb Group of Insurance Companies, Goya Foods, and McGraw-Hill.
July 4th, 1992, live from Governor's Island in the middle of New York Harbor. I'm Bill Baker with Revel Carr from the Mystic Seaport Museum, and Frank Brainerd, father of Op Sale. We just saw, I guess, one of the greatest ships of all time going by, the Amerigo Vespucci behind us.
Well, indeed. She's one of the most impressive of the tall ships. She is operated by the Italian Naval Academy in Livorno, and again, one of the most impressive. She looks, she's a three-decker. She looks like a ship of the line, similar to HMS Victory, Lord Nelson's flagship. So she's configured to have that appearance. But I think one of the points that Captain Cummings had made about the safety at sea is an interesting one here, because, as I understand it, at the Naval Academy in Livorno, they have a set of her rigging set up on shore with safety nets under it. So the cadets, before they go aloft on the rigging of the ship that you're seeing on your screen right now, they have an opportunity to practice ashore with safety nets under them, and I'm sure that's reassuring to them before they actually face the riggers under trying conditions at sea with the wind howling and sleet and rain. Imagine what it's like up there trying to beat those sails and furl those sails with ice on them and so on. It is not an easy task.
Rev, have you ever heard what happened to the sister ship?
No, I don't know what happened to the sister ship.
Cristoforo Colombo just disappeared. The Russians took her, and she's never been seen since.
Is that right?
Beautiful, beautiful vessel. What a shame.
Indeed. She is the Amerigo Vespucci is again reported to be one of the most beautiful ships, not only from her exterior view, which we're seeing, but below decks as well. She has magnificent carving and paneling and so on. And that again goes back to a long tradition of ship decoration, pride in the vessel. We mentioned figureheads earlier on, and I think it might be a good moment to talk about that kind of ship decoration. The figureheads have almost a mythical background. They were eyes for the ship. It was the idea of putting eyes in the bow of the ship to give it life and to give it a vision of its own. And the early Viking ships, of course, had heads on the bows of the ships with eyes. The Greeks today still paint oculi, still paint eyes on the bows of some of their vessels. So that the figureheads did that, but later on the figureheads came to represent the glory of the vessel. In many instances they personified. Libertad has a Liberty figurehead on the bow. And so many of the ships, the Georg Steg from Denmark that went by a little earlier, she has the bust, the head of Georg Steg himself, the son of the man who founded that organization, as its figurehead. But and we see a beautiful figurehead right now on the screen with trail boards coming back from it, gold leafed. Again, all of this represents the pride that the owners of a ship, or in this case, the Italian government through their Naval Academy, has in the America Vespucci, and that tradition carried on with stern carvings as well, other decorations around the ship, leading into a whole range of maritime arts.
They used to say that the carvings on a ship of this period, the original period, cost 1/2 as much as the entire ship. That's how much.
There are also stories of ships in the 18th century when the British and the French were absolutely festooning their vessels with gold leaf carvings. There are stories of captains, once they got out of sight of their home port, cutting the carvings off to lighten the ship and go about their business as a warship.
You have quite a collection of figureheads at your museum. I assume they're incredibly valuable and expensive in the sense of being great works of art in and of themselves.
I think they are valuable, certainly, but it's rarity that is the key. There just aren't that many good figureheads from the past, authenticated figureheads from the past. Very often they're hard to identify because they have survived, because they came off some ship that was broken up and they went into some warehouse, and then from the warehouse they went to some person's collection without knowing from whence they came. And so very often it's a detective story trying to trace back what ship the particular figurehead relates to. We do have more than 70 figureheads in the Mystic Seaport collection, and you're correct, it is one of the world's great collections.
Are there people who actually collect, I mean, besides museums, collect figureheads?
Indeed, there are.
In fact, very expensive hobby.
Bill Koch, who most recently was the defender of the America's Cup, he has some figureheads in his personal collection. One of the great stories in recent times was of a collection that was in a hotel in Denmark, the Skagen Hotel, and the figureheads that lined that hotel disappeared, and they were gone for 50 years. No one knew where they went. And a few years back, someone opened a warehouse over in Denmark or Sweden, and there they all were. And now they are in the Maritime Museum in Göteborg in Sweden. So that in some instances, whole collections disappear for periods of time and then come back to life, so to speak.
100 years ago, were there people who all they did was, for a living, was carve figureheads? I guess you can't really make a living doing that. Could you make a living doing that back then?
Indeed you could. Even in small communities, certainly in New York, there were a number of carvers, but even in small communities like Mystic, and Mystic was a major shipbuilding center in the 19th century, there were people who focused on figurehead carving and certainly earned their living that way.
The clipper ship James Baines, owned by James Baines, had a figurehead of James Baines. I sell cat and all.
That's the ultimate ego trip,
Sure
right?
is. Well, they didn't mind it. They were very proud of those ships. He named the ship after himself and his own figure for the figurehead. She was bought by Queen Victoria, and they kept the name James Baines.
Revel, can you tell what ship that is we are looking at now? Beautifully under full sail. It's a little hard to see it. The sun is coming out now.
I'm pretty sure that's the Kaiwu Maru, brand new vessel.
Right.
And yeah, I think she was built just a couple of years ago, and is part of bringing sail training back to the Japanese merchant navy. That's been something that's been missing there for a number of years, but they've seen the merits of it for merchant officers in other parts of the world, and so the Japanese have now built the Kaiwo Maru.
And the sister ship.
No, I'm sorry, she was built a long time ago. There is a new one, the Kaisei. That's where I was mixed up. Kaiwo Maru was built back in the 30s, but the new one is the Kaisei, and that's the new effort that they're launching.
In '76, the Nippon Maru came here. Sister ship of the Kaiwo Maru, Nippon Maru.
Let's just enjoy this incredible beauty.
It's great. It's so beautiful. And the day is perfect. The sun is coming out.
Yes, the sun is coming out. I'll tell you a little bit more about New York Harbor in a minute, but I just want to enjoy. Now, what are those sails, those kind of triangular sails up at the bow of the ship?
They're called her headsails or her jibs. There is one story thinking of hurricanes and storms at sea. The clipper ship Dreadnought was caught in a terrible storm down near Cape Horn, and a fellow named Samuel Samuels, known as Bully Samuels, was the skipper. And a horrendous wave dashed the rudder and the steering mechanism of the ship. It also dashed Bully Samuels. He had a compound fracture of his leg. And despite that injury, he was able, using the headsails, the ones on the bow of the ship, he used those as rudders and steered his ship backwards to safety. Quite a spectacular undertaking, whereas a man is laid low with a fractured leg and still managed to captain his ship. Willie Samuels was a legend
He drove his ship backwards up the East River. She came out of the slip, and instead of turning with her bow the right way, she turned with her back down, and he took her with the back down, all the way across the East River. He also became an evangelical preacher in the last 20 years of his life on South Street. He wrote a book about religion.
Well, I can understand that.
It's the same with the sea. Yes.
This is
something about
this is a spiritual thing,
yes.
and it's a spiritual thing to many people.
Yes.
We had Walter Cronkite here, a man who has such an incredible dignity and a distinguished background, but a man who maintains his personal humility, and maybe that personal humility in some ways comes from Walter's understanding of the power of the sea and how relatively small man is against these forces of nature. So it very much, and most of the great sea people are, like Captain Cummings that we just saw here, are really kind of nice spiritual people.
I think there is that kind of emotion that comes with this. Certainly there are adventurers, but very quickly they learn the reality of what they're coping with. And I think it builds character to go to sea in these ships, to spend time at sea. Both of my sons have had at-sea experiences, some in square rig and one just recently in a 115-foot vessel for 8 months. And I think it does something for the individual to spend that kind of time at sea, day in, day out, never seeing land on the horizon. You become very respectful of the environment in which you placed yourself.
Right.
As the great parade of sail passes before us, let's listen to another important figure in the television world, Robert McNeil, co-host of the McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour, who is himself a sailor and wanted to be here. Well, he's here in his words as he reads from his own book called Word Struck.
That's nice. Wonderful.
I'd like to read you a few words about the sea from my book, Word Struck, the memoir of my childhood in Nova Scotia. Out of the atmosphere of values every family breathes of what is good and what is bad, I knew that the sea was good. I took for granted that it built character to go to sea, to wrest your living from it, to respect it, to be in awe of its terrible powers, but to take it as a matter of course that you went down to it and did business with it. In our mythology, everything to do with the sea was clean and honorable work. Awareness of the sea used to be far more common than it is today, when air travel has made the oceans seem puny, and most people think of boats only for pleasure. Experience of the sea used to be central in the lives of the English-speaking peoples, and knowledge of the oceans was vital to commerce, exploration, and conquest. The sea was so familiar a part of Western life from the Elizabethans to the 20th century that expressions relating to it became metaphors for activities on land. Such expressions filled the language I heard or read in books about the sea that I began devouring at 12 or 13. Of all of the expressions you're about to hear will be familiar to those who are now manning the tall ships. Some are essential to their operation. But as you listen, consider whether any of our editorial writers today could get through a week without using one or other of them. Everybody depended on his ship coming in. They were all in the same boat, waiting till the bitter end. In everyday life, they would back and fill or be taken down a peg or two if they didn't know the ropes. They had to keep a weather eye open and give a stranger a wide berth if he was bearing down on them and they didn't like the cut of his jib, because he might be armed to the teeth, at least until he showed his true colors or nailed his colors to the mast. If he spliced the main brace before the sun was over the yardarm, put too much grog on the rocks and down the hatch, got 3 sheets to the wind and keeled over, he might have to trim his sails and pour oil on troubled waters to get on an even keel, or risk being keel-hauled. If they slacked off and rested on their oars, weren't pulling their own weight, or sailed too close to the wind, someone might lower the boom and take the wind out of their sails, forcing them to chart a new course. In the doldrums, if they didn't make headway and were dead in the water, they might be all at sea and long for a safe harbor because time and tide wait for no man. If landlubbers shoved off and ventured on the high seas come hell or high water where it isn't all plain sailing, they'd have to hit the decks and haul it or be half seas over or even pooped before they could drop anchor or barge in to put their port side alongside the dock for the longshoremen to discharge cargo. If some tar listened to too much scuttlebutt and talked a lot of bilge, they might give him some leeway or tell him to pipe down or put him in the booby hatch if he and the captain were at loggerheads. If a ship was first rate and the captain no figurehead, he'd have her shipshape from stem to stern, so by and large she'd get a clean bill of health. Then the swab could clear the decks, stow it, lower the gangway, don his middy blouse and pea jacket, and if he wasn't too hard up, go off in his own hook and see whether the broad-beamed lady pacing the widow's walk still liked him or was just a fair-weather friend.
I think they're shooting at us. I'm not sure.
It's the Navy with their 21-gun salutes for the vessels as they go down the parade. They're just off the battery now and saluting each vessel as it goes by.
That's the voice and face of Peter Neal, who's the president of the South Street Seaport Museum, who's one of the great nautical experts and runs one of the great maritime museums of all time. Also, I have with me Rafael Masarasa, who's the president of the Spain 92 Foundation. You're the man that brought the caravels over. What a project that must have been.
Well, fortunately, the caravels sailed their own way. I didn't pull, but I was sort of the ground support for them, and I've been organizing the tour of U.S. ports. New York is port number 14 in continental USA.
What was the first port?
The first port was Miami, and before that we had been in Puerto Rico, which is also San Juan, which is also an American port.
Where do you say Columbus landed? You're representing the Spanish government. Where do you say he landed?
Well, we say he landed where he said he landed.
Which is?
This is the island of San Salvador in Bahamas. Many experts have contradicted this, and based in accurate research, but we don't want officially to make a move until some more evidence comes up. But he said he landed in San Salvador, so we stand on that.
Okay, San Salvador it is, at least for the moment.
Yes, that's it.
Now, how much? I don't know what the ships originally cost. I think it was something like $50,000 originally. I mean, back in 1491.
Yes.
What did these cost?
Well, those were dollars, 15th century dollars. This fleet cost to build. The cost was around $14 million. 14 million. But then to man them and sail them is quite expensive also in these days.
There are a lot of stories about Christopher Columbus. One is that Isabella had to hawk her royal jewels to send the fleet in this direction. Is that true or false?
I would say that's a little bit of legend and a little bit of truth. Isabella really supported, and as Mr. Grasso has said, the president of the stock market has said she was a great investor. So she invested in Columbus adventure, and she got her money back for sure.
She sure did.
At least in terms of glory and satisfaction for this surprise of meeting an unknown land in the middle of the way between Europe and Asia.
They also said that Columbus died poor and in prison. Is that true or false?
No, that's not true. He died rich and with these nobility titles that he had agreed, the crown had agreed to grant him before he sailed. So before he sailed, he had signed an agreement with the crown in which he made sure that he was going to profit from it. Not only economically, but also in honors. which were very important at that time. But it's true that when he disobeyed the order of the crown about enslaving Indians, he was put in chain and brought back to Spain in chains. But his descendants, his heirs, are very wealthy and well-to-do people and with a nobility, which includes the title of Admiral of the Ocean Seas and Duke of Veragua.
Where is Christopher Columbus right now, his remains?
His remains, there is a controversy, everything is controversial about this guy. There is a sort of a dispute between the Dominican Republic and Seville in Spain. We, the Spaniards, believe, and we have historical records to assert this, that he is in Seville.
Peter Neal, what ship is that going by with the beautiful marks on its sails?
That's the Shabab Oman. She's a wooden training vessel built in Scotland in 1971 for the Sultan's Navy. She's been converted, built as a schooner, but she was converted to a three-masted barkentine, I believe, and she flies the Omani colors. She's probably come as far away as anyone, except probably the Japanese ship. And it's sort of interesting, earlier on one of the ships that our audience may have seen was the Galaxy, and she carries the flag of Israel. So we have all nations and all credos represented in the parade of sail. We're about halfway through. This is about the 17th or 18th ship in the parade of 34 Class A ships. We've been at it about an hour and 15 minutes, or since the actual parade started. The crowds here, I think, are growing, which is wonderful. And the weather's clearing. It's I can tell from looking at our monitor. It's a lot easier to see the ships now than it was before. I have a question for Raphael. Talk a little bit about the research that went into the building of the ships. We don't have, of course, the originals, so we really don't know.
We don't have the originals, and I think that the first hint was provided by an American scholar, Eugene Lyon, from the University of Florida. He was researching something else in the Spanish archives on the Indies, and then he found some records about the Niña. Those records were extremely interesting because they referred in terms of capacity, in terms of barrels. So that's how they kept researching, and although they didn't have, of course, the actual plans of the ships, they did find some records at the Crown Archives on the capacity. So in terms of barrels, always. If the description is that she can hold 50 barrels, then the scholars can figure out what the actual size was.
Right. So
and as for the shape, there are many engravings and paintings of the time of Columbus that exactly look like the ones we have on the back.
Of course, it's amazing how small they look. Of course, everyone who goes aboard says, how could they have made that passage in such a small, cramped vessel, and also such an ungainly vessel? I mean, they don't sail very well, do they?
No, they don't. Well, the Pinta was the fastest one, and she was state of the art in technology at the time of Columbus. She could sail headwinds. But the Santa Maria, I like to say that she is clumsy as a sea cow, and she will only take backwinds, and that's the reason why Columbus lost her on the second bay he discovered, which was in Santo Domingo. In update is Haiti.
Peter, when I was in elementary school, they always used to tell me that everybody back in 1492 thought the world was flat, and that really Columbus was doing a most daring thing. Is that true?
Isn't it still flat? I think it's flat now, as far as I can see. I guess that is what we were taught, but I think the historians will tell you that there was a considerable body of knowledge that was already in place by scholars and navigators. They knew the world wasn't flat. They may not have known exactly what its shape was and the full dimension of of the body, but it wasn't as if they were all there in blind ignorance. The scientists of the day had a pretty good idea.
What's the ship we're looking at now, the ship with the red sails?
I'm not sure. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm a little bit lost. We've been looking at a lot of different versions, different views from the various cameras here. She's a three-masted schooner. I can't quite read the flag.
It seems it's like Italian.
Is it Italian flag?
Green, white, and red.
What's the ship? We're trying to get some coaching as to what the ship is, and we're not sure, so we'll just enjoy it.
Exactly. What, Raphael? How has the reception been as the ships have come up the coast? You've made 14 port visits on it?
Oh, it's been incredible. I've realized after visiting so many ports in the U.S. that these vessels are symbols, but as symbols they belong to the world, but they pertain to the Americas.
Well, now what will there was a West Coast itinerary. Is that still on, or?
We are not sure that we will make it because the West Coast is some itinerary that the vessels, these ships, cannot sail on their own. So there's a financial operation there that needs to be completed.
There have been several sets of replicas of Columbus's ships.
Right, the first bunch had to be towed across. Right?
They were towed across. We actually have our own
100 years ago.
our own set that unfortunately had its moment and then was towed up a river in Virginia, and I think they are rotting in the mud. It's one of the big problems we have about vessels that are built for special occasions, commemorative occasions. How are you going to sustain these ships after the quincentennial is finished?
Well, we want to make sure that whoever gets them, a city or a museum or whoever, knows what they are getting. These ships need a lot of work if you want to keep them in the right shape, especially with the caulking and rigs, and everything needs to be taken care of. So we would like that anybody that is willing to obtain these vessels or to acquire them is aware of the work that it implies.
Yes. Well, it is a lot of work. I have several wooden vessels in the fleet at the South Street Seaport, and I can tell you that you just cannot get behind. These boats were not built to survive, actually, and natural forces, rot just takes them on. It's amazing. We have a couple of vessels that are over 100 years old that are out of wood, and that really comes from a tremendous program of maintenance. It's extremely expensive, and I think a lot of people out there don't realize that these ships are great cultural resources. They're great cultural monuments, and they're museum pieces. And we take, in our fine arts museums, we take great care, for example, of the great masterpiece paintings, their conservation and their ongoing care. And we in the Maritime Museum business feel you have to do exactly the same thing with ships. Otherwise, we will lose them. Yeah. And we have lost most of them.
Yes. Peter Neal from the South Street Seaport, the president. Rafael Mazaraza, who's the president of Spain 92 Foundation. We thank you both. Peter, you'll be coming back. But right now, we want to talk about the privately owned sail training vessel, the Christian Radek. It's an old friend to New York Harbor, and yesterday our crew joined her as she headed for Sandy Hook, New Jersey. The Radek was also the winning vessel in the Grand Regatta 92 from Cadiz, Spain to San Juan. Congratulations to the cadets for a fine finish.
I'm Gunnar Utgård, as a typical Norwegian name. I'm on the Christian Radek, Norwegian square rigger. What I do, it's like having to deal a lot with the kids. It's like being the headmaster or something like that, compared to what it's being a school. And this is a school ship, civilian ship. 16-year-old in Norway today don't know what to become anyway. It's too early for them. They just trying to figure it out. So while they're done 10 years of schooling already, they want to do something different for a year. So they try this. If they don't do things right, it could be also dangerous, and they know that if they don't pull together, things doesn't work. And they live very close to each other and have to put up with various things that they normally wouldn't do. And one thing is for certain, they appreciate various things when they get back home, like having their own room and that stuff. That's what I enjoy after being here, you know. Boys and girls are having no different operation. They have to do the same thing all over. But they take no considerations whether it's boys or girls. They do the same as the boys, and they climb just as high, and they're just as clever and just as strong being in the rig. No difference whatsoever. That goes with dirty jobs as well. Being a fast ship, we just got to do the right things. You know, we don't have to be particularly clever to be fast. We just do what she deserves, you know, do the right things.
Can we pick up on the sort of remaining? Is that a good point?
Welcome back now to Opsail 92, the Tall Ship Parade. We're broadcasting live from Governor's Island. I'm Bill Baker, president of WNET, and with me are my co-hosts for this hour, Peter Neal, president of the South Street Seaport, and joining us once again is our guest, Captain Ernst Cummings, former commander of the Eagle. Peter, you were saying something.
Well, before the break, Bill, I was talking to Rafael Masaras of the Spain 92 Foundation about the fact that the very small number of ships that actually do remain. Actually, Rebel Carr makes a point that I think bears repeating. You know, we only have one real 18th century ship left in the United States. And of the inventory of 19th century ships and 20th century ships that have major historic significance, they're less than 300, and more than half of them are World War II naval vessels. So when you think about the ships that, for example, lined the street of ships, South Street in New York in the late 1900s, where there were literally hundreds of barks and barkentines and full-rig ships and clipper ships that lined the shores, we have hardly any of them remaining. Now that's a critical thing. We sit here and we're celebrating this wonderful rendezvous from around the world of 40 ships, but even that is almost a tragedy when you think how few of these vessels, which literally explored and defined our world, remain. And it's one of the great tragedies, I think, and it's one of the things that constantly we need to remind ourselves is that we just shouldn't get together and celebrate maritime heritage 1 year or 2 years or 3 years for these commemorative events. We have to do it all the time. And there has been, I think, a very strange and I would say unconscionable neglect of this portion of our heritage. It's astonishing to see, for example, the amount of funds that are invested in the restoration of historic buildings. There has hardly been, from, say, federal funds, for example, there's been hardly any money ever invested in our maritime heritage and in these ships. And no matter how hard we work, and in the museums, and know how many ships we save and get back into sailing ships, ultimately we're losing them day by day, and soon they'll be gone, and part of our cultural memory will be eradicated forever. And really hope that people who see these ships and are inspired by them will remember that they should come back to their maritime museums. They should support those organizations, and they're all over the country. There are literally hundreds of organizations, large and small, struggling to keep this part of our heritage alive.
Your South Street Seaport is doing an incredible job, and you're quite an operator there, and that operation, and an operator in the nicest sense of the word. What's the Captain? What's the ship, Captain Cummings? What's the ship we're looking at there? Can you tell? The sun came out so bright now.
This might be the most difficult task of us all day, Bill. This is the full rig ship. I think this is the Polish ship. And I'm going to...
Dalmazurzi, is it not?
Dalmazurzi, I think. Is that the correct pronunciation?
It's a Dalmazurzi.
Full rigged?
A full rig ship built in 1982.
Lodzezi.
Lodzezi is the correct pronunciation. I guess, Cummings, you and I are not Polish. We come from Ireland, I suspect.
Well, I am from, my parents are from Germany and Ireland, so I have an affinity to the 5 sister ships that were built, of course, at Blohm & Voss, the Eagle being one of them.
Right.
We'll get that into that later. But the first time I saw the Dalmazurzi was back in 1984 when we had the tall ship rendezvous in Bermuda, Halifax, and if you remember, in Quebec City, celebrating the 350th anniversary of Jacques Cartier finding Quebec. And she was brand new at that time, and just a magnificent vessel.
What we're seeing now is the Sagres 2. You can see the distinctive emblem on the sails. The large red crosses are on her main and foresails. She's a 3-masted steel barkentine and built in Germany in 1937. Damaged in World War II and taken over by the United States. Ship was then passed on to Brazil and now is owned by the Portuguese. And she'll be docked actually at South Street Seaport. She's one of the 7 ships that are going to be at South Street Seaport over the forthcoming weekend and opened to the public.
Now, Peter, you won't get mad at me if I tell you that it's not a barkentine, it's a bark.
Thank you for doing that, because it's the mistake I have dreaded for the whole 2 weeks here. I knew I was going to make it.
Peter, we still love you anyway.
On the Polish ship, let's talk about one of the most interesting things here is that many of these ships, regardless of their ownership, have been built in Poland in the last 15 or 20 years. I think more than 6 or 7 ships, I think it's 7, have been built in the Gdansk shipyards and have been purchased as recently as I think the Kaisei Maru was just purchased out of Gdansk about 6 or 8 months ago.
And there was one even sooner than that. There was one that was purchased, that was ordered by the former Soviet Union. And she was only finished, I believe, about a month ago. Another organization, the Soviet Union did not want it, so another organization was going to purchase it. And at the last minute, I believe the Russian government purchased it.
Well, we're coming up on the series of Russian ships. They're Russian ships now, they're Estonian ships, they're Latvian ships. That's going to be quite an interesting story as we continue to watch the parade unfold.
Captain, could we go back to the, you mentioned the Sagres too.
Yes.
Could we go back to her? And I mentioned the 5 sister ships. There were 5 ships built in the Blohm & Voss yard in Hamburg, Germany, all before, well, 4 of them before World War II. There was the Goshfolk 1, which after the war was taken by the Soviet Union, and it's a Tovarish, and she is here today with us. There was the Mircea, which was built for the Romanians and is in the Black Sea today. She's not with us. There was the Horse Vessel, which was acquired by the United States and, of course, led the parade of ships today as Eagle. And there was the Sagres 2, who was the, I think I've named the 5 sister ships now. She was originally given over to England, who sold it to Brazil, where she was a Guanabara, and then Brazil sold it to Portugal. And we have 4 of the 5 sister ships here today.
So Blumenvoss was the Gdansk shipyard of the previous generation.
I think that's a very good analogy.
And they are still, I think, alive and well and still building ships this very day, are they not?
Yes, sir. In fact, the fifth sister was built in the 50s along the lines of Eagle, and that's Goshfolk 2 that is here with us today.
Look at that gorgeous shot there.
That's, I believe, Tovarish. She's a Ukrainian now, a three-masted bark built in Germany in the 30s, and she's operated by a merchant marine school in the Ukraine.
And one of the sister ships.
And one of the sister ships that Ernie Cummings was just talking about. We're about to see 4 Russian ships in a row. Tovarish, followed by Mir, followed by Sedov, and followed by Krusenstern. Those are the schedule order of the ships as they come down from the Verrazano and approach our position here on Governor's Island.
We're going to now introduce another poem at this beautiful moment. And it's the official Opsail poem for 1976, written by John Masefield. And the reader is television talk show host, public television talk show host, Charlie Rose.
Here by the towers of your splendid town, ship after ship, the racers will come in, their colors going up and their sails down, as welcomes to America begin. The sirens will all bellow and make din, and all bells beat in thunder of ovation. As one by one each racer, each a queen, arrives, salutes the eagle and takes station. One beauty more in all the lovely scene, the grand scene of the ship that has made good their path across the sea by hardihood. Ah, would that he who helped plan this test of manhood on the sea were with us still, watching with us the ending of the quest as men and ships their destinies fulfill. He whom America in desolation ne'er mourns from sea to sea, but he has gone. A nation's memory and veneration among the radiant, ever venturing on, somewhere with mourning as such spirits will.
Talk on this side, please. We are live. We are live July 4th, 1992. I'm Bill Baker, one of your guides here on Governor's Island, the official 1992 Hopsail Parade of tall ships. I'm rejoined by Revel Carr, who's the director and president of the Mystic Seaport Museum. Revel, the tall ships from the former Soviet Union are coming by right now.
Yes, it's nice to have this kind of a showing, this kind of participation. The Sidov from Latvia was on our screen a few minutes ago. Very handsome vessel, unusual configuration with 3 islands in her layout. The forecastle, the midsection, and the stern each have their own raised platforms. So she's an interesting vessel built back in the 20s. So she's one of the older vessels built by Krupp in Germany, in Kiel. So she passed by a few minutes ago, and it is nice to see their participation, particularly with what's happened in Russia in recent times. I know it's very difficult for them.
Captain Cummings was telling me that the Russian fleet, when it got to Puerto Rico, it was found that they were running out of food. And a group up here in New York, led by the B'nai B'rith, and I think Paul Newman was involved somehow, organized a group that literally these huge tall ships that must use tons and tons of food for a crew of 200 or 300 people.
Right.
There was a group of dedicated citizens up here in New York who organized a fundraising and food raising, really, and got food out to the ships so that as the ships pass today on this July 4th, the crews are hopefully well fed and pretty happy to be here.
Well, I think that is a symbolic effort that may be indicative of what we all are going to need to do to help the former Soviet Union through the transition that it's enduring right now. It is not easy. I was there 2 years ago, and things were difficult then. You could see how difficult they were and how sparse the stores were and so on. And you know, in this point of transition, that supplies there are difficult, and we in this country and others may need to lend a hand to help that country through its smooth transition.
By the way, an interesting fact, as the cannons go off here in New York Harbor, those 2 huge tall buildings at the bottom of New York Harbor in New York's General Battery area, Wall Street area, the World Trade Center, which are the World Trade Center is run by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. It's the first really bi-state organization in the history of this country, founded in the 1920s and approved by the U.S. Congress. Those 2 huge tall buildings at the bottom of New York's Manhattan Island, those 2 huge buildings will house a Soviet trade mission, the first one, a formal one in this country. What ship do we see right now?
I suspect that's Tovarich. I think that's the bow Tovarich. And again, one of the Russian vessels, I believe Sidov is behind her. Again, we can't see them exactly at the moment, but
this may give us a hint.
One of the things you were mentioning, the World Trade Center towers, they do tower above these tall ships, but it's remarkable when you think that some of this nation's aircraft carriers are, if you stood the aircraft carrier on end, they're nearly the height of the World Trade Center.
Well, that's a good cue into Zachary Fisher, who's a New York philanthropist. And one of the wonderful things about New York, Zach, is that there are people like you who have taken personal wealth and given back to the community. And you've done it in an interesting way in that you created or helped create the floating museum on the Hudson River called the Intrepid Sea Air Space Museum.
That's right.
Tell us about that, Sam.
There was a meeting, interestingly enough, there was a meeting in 1978 at Vogue magazine for 20 businessmen, breakfast meeting. I was the only one that felt that this great ship should not be scrapped.
This is an aircraft carrier.
That's right.
3 football fields long.
That's right. Built in 1943 at the cost about $40 million, and now they run about $1 billion. But I felt with the history of the aircraft carrier like Intrepid, it should not be scrapped. The youngsters of our country should know what blood was shed to save this country and freedom. And so the history, the Intrepid fought in the largest battle of naval history, the Battle of Leyte Gulf. She sank 2 of the largest Japanese ships. She lost more kamikaze pilots, men, than any other aircraft carrier did. And so, being a private citizen, to acquire an aircraft carrier, which is only acquired by a state or a city, it took me from 1978 to 1982 to open up the aircraft carrier. But I'll tell you something, you know, Mr. Baker, that more importantly, that's hardware. But more importantly, the Intrepid has led me on to people. And now I am building homes. It's called the Zachary and Elizabeth Fisher Houses. And the Army, Navy, and Air Force give me an acre of land at each hospital. The Bethesda first one was opened by President Bush a year ago. It houses 20 of the wives of the men that are in the hospital. And they then are able to, if they're getting cancer treatments, they come back to the house, they stay with their wives, they go back for treatment. I feel that the Intrepid has led me on to bigger things. What will happen is I will have 10 built this year and 21 by the end of 1993, which will house 3,000 families. And to me, the Intrepid, again, is hardware, but people, and that's my greatest achievement besides business.
From your aircraft carrier on to the lovely ship, the Danmark, we have a report for you about setting the sails on those ships. It's narrated by Cadet Simon Dittelson. Setting the sails is the subject of this clip.
We haul the yards round and make sail. For the first time, I'm filled with an indescribable joy. Just the fact that everything is done by hand makes me happy in quite a new way. We turn the heavy yards, weighing over a ton each, so that they are properly positioned in relation to the wind. We have about 12,000 nautical miles ahead of us. That's halfway around the world. The wind is about a force 5, and we're doing 8 to 9 knots. In about half an hour, all 26 sails are set. Almost 17,000 square feet of canvas for the wind to play with. While half of us are working to get the ship to sail, the others are sleeping or having lessons. Today we got the old trade wind that is going to blow us to the West Indies. Nearly a month at sea without seeing land.
You're looking at the world's largest tall ship, the Soviet ship, the Sedov. Revel Carr is with me, head of the Mystic Seaport Museum. Revel?
Well, she's a 400-foot tall ship, which is really a substantial vessel. She is sailing under the Latvian flag, again, as the Baltic republics have split off. She, from Riga, Latvia, is representing that nation. She's named after a polar explorer, Russian polar explorer, who headed for the North Pole back in 1911 and died on the way back from the trip.
One of the things that's my hobby, I don't know, you know it, Revel, is polar exploration. And there are about 4 things in this world to me that you can read you can read about, but you can never appreciate. One of them is, of course, the North and the South Pole. Those are 2 of them. The other one for me was the Grand Canyon. But the last one is this great harbor. I came to this city only 15 years ago to live, but I came here in my early 20s for the first time. And everybody had seen New York Harbor in movies and on television, but to me, to see it in real was so different. It was so much more majestic, so much larger.
Well, it's an extraordinary thing when you realize how many vessels there are actually out here. Not only the participants, there are 260 participating vessels, but all the spectator vessels, and yet there's plenty of room in this harbor to absorb all of that.
And along the shores of this harbor, listening to us live in New York now, maybe 7 or 8 million people lining the harbors. We said maybe 40,000 ships. It's an incredible experience. And it's such a happy day, and it's clearing off. We're hoping that the Virgin Lightship gets up so we can get some aerial shots for you all, so you have a chance to see it from the air. The Lightship hasn't had a chance to go up, but we're hoping she does. The Sedov going in front of it. This is kind of a historic shot in a lot of ways.
Yeah, she had
going in front of the one of the fabulous Coast Guard ships.
And she had a near disaster early on in her career. Back in the 30s, she was rounding the Horn and her cargo shifted. She was the sail training vessel that actually carried cargo. Her cargo shifted and she sent out an SOS, but by the time the rescuing ships got to her, her crew had manhandled the bulk cargo back to put her on an even keel. But she was almost lost over 50 years ago.
My daughters, Christian and Angela, have some questions they wanted me to ask you, and that is, do the ships dock so that the public can visit them, Revel?
Indeed. That's going to be, I think, the great follow-up to this parade. All these vessels are heading up the Hudson, turning around, coming back, and then throughout New York, in Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan, at South Street, and along piers in the Hudson, these vessels will be docked and will be available for the public to get a close-up view and to meet the crews. One of the key points is none of this is going to happen without people who organized Opsail, of course, but the crews are on board. And one of the great advantages of this kind of an international meeting is the opportunity for people to meet one another, for